All right. Good afternoon and good morning to everyone. I'm Nelly Vasquez, Business Development Manager here in Turner for New York. I'd like to welcome you all to our roundtable discussion. Today, we'll be talking about the state of the industry through the second quarter. Before I introduce our panelists, let's just run through the format really quick. We'll have a 25 to 30-minute discussion followed by 20 minutes of moderated Q&A. During the discussion, feel free to submit questions via the Q&A button that you'll see on the bottom of the screen. I'll be monitoring it during the course of the conversation, and I'll run through as many as I can. We have an amazing group of panelists today. I'm very excited for today's discussion. Starting with New York, we have Brooke Amerga, Vice President running the New York Procurement Group. We have Rob Barbera, Senior Vice President, providing executive oversight for our design build projects. Nick Barker, Vice President, General Manager, representing Northern Texas and Oklahoma. Rory DeJean, Senior Vice President, part of our Global Development Team. Karen Hogan, Vice President, General Manager, representing Kansas. And last but not least, Stuart Smith, who manages our operations in Toronto. So without further ado, let's get started with your respective markets. What are the headlines? Rory, since you have a broad reach, let's start with you.
Sure. Just things, as most people know, after the pandemic, seem like they're getting back to normal. The one big thing that we're all seeing across the country, up in Canada, is a very large shortage of qualified subcontractors and their staff. Quite a few people either retired during the pandemic or they decided to leave the industry. So both in the US and Canada, there's a tremendous labor shortage of people that have the experience that we need in the construction. And then the other thing is the shortage of materials. Everyone knows that there's a huge shortage around the country. And it's not just in one area. It's not that it peaks in one area. It's pretty much spread out across the US and Canada. So those are the two main things. The market seems very vibrant. It seems as though there's a lot of work out there for all of us. It is still a very competitive market. And the one good thing is talking to architects, it seems as though they still have a lot on their drafting tables.
I'll pick up from there, Rory, and just from a Canadian perspective and a Toronto perspective, highlight. I think the big question is, as you were referring to, where has the workforce gone? I think you talk about, the retirement and the career transitions. I think a lot of focus in Canada is how do we accelerate the development of careers across the board, and how do we engage increased interest in the trades and various disciplines to support the incredible demand that's in the marketplace. And so I think as we look in the balance of 2022 and 2023 and beyond, it's really how do we support the infrastructure needs that our countries have, and what do we do to ensure effective growth?
Yeah, that's great, Stuart. In North Texas, it's a similar theme. So an interesting stat, just for North Texas, in 2024, over $80 billion of work is going to get put in place across various market segments. And that's just what I'm exposed to in this market. There's sections that I'm not even exposed to. So there's addition to be above and beyond that. So similar to what you just heard from Rory and Stuart, in that, a shortage of staff and resources is becoming a continued topic in every circle. But the positives is that it's really pushing the envelope from innovation. It's pushing the envelope as it relates to prefabrication and modular building, and finding more ways to be productive and providing a quality product with less people. With that, just a lot of the encouragement that we give to a lot of our clients is that when evaluating talent and looking for a partner, a lot of times the return on the experience and capacity is now moved up the ranks as to what is being of a value. The fees are important, all those types of things are important, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to who has the resources and the experience to do the work. And more than ever, that's become important. So in Texas and Oklahoma, as Rory said, it's a very vibrant, lot of, I think there's 30 Fortune 500 companies that have moved to North Texas. And it's a very, very great place to live, but with that has come an increase in housing prices, an increase in some other areas. So I think we're, following in the footsteps of some other large metropolitan areas. But interesting that a lot of the chambers and feedback is that we'll pass Chicago from a population here in the next 3 years. So we'll see.
Echoing what Rory said in New York, we see a lot of The market is strong, except for the residential market, which may be a little bit down. A lot of work at the airports. We're running into issues with supply chain, as Rory mentioned. A lot of constraints and lead times, escalation. We're dealing a lot with projects that require MBE, WBE as well. And one of the things that we're seeing more and more in New York, which I'm happy to say, is a lot of design build projects. Or early engagement of the general contractor, which in my mind helps the project, work in collaboration as opposed to working in silos, and understanding that we have a lead time problem or supply chain issue much further down the road. So that's some of the things that we're seeing in New York. Rob, are you seeing some of that?
Yeah, so you mentioned, Brooke, design build, and I'll comment on that. Obviously, my comments are predicated basically on the general building market. Design build has a different, or I'll say adjusted application when you start talking about infrastructure, but we're going to stick to general building. And the interesting thing about it is, while depending on the part of the country you're in, you've seen design build certainly present itself in public environments, you're starting to see more and more mega projects be applied to the design build delivery in many parts of the country, whether it be the upper Midwest or the upper Western part of the country, and traverse its way, across west to east. The West Coast always being strong in design build and continues that level of attention. The thing I find really interesting is how design build is evolving, right? How are owners looking at design build, and what are ways that maybe they can put their own little spin on design build so that it fits their projects? Things like holding on to the designer up to a certain point in time and then releasing that solicitation to the marketplace for CMs and design builders to jump on and take on that designer and complete to the end of design and then execute the construction phase. There's this novating of design where the design is novated over onto the building team. So these are creative ways to sort of take the design build concept and see where it can go and how it can be applied differently. I will say that newcomers to the market, the design build market, that is, it's important to be cognizant and careful that you have the resources to be able to deliver design build on your own teams and understand what it is that you're getting into. And I would say, reach out to the professionals out there, that have done this before and are familiar with what those steps are and what those resources need to be, so that before you jump on in, it'll move quick and you want to be prepared for it. Karen?
Yeah, great. And I am fortunate that I am in the Midwest, where we have a lot of the mega jobs coming. So while it's fantastic to have it, it also comes with its own challenges. We went from seeing large jobs in the Kansas City area once a year, maybe a $200 million, $300 million job, where now we're talking billions. The airport is finishing up in Kansas City in about 8 months, which is attracting a lot of new businesses. A lot of large manufacturing companies are coming here. Obviously, we have a lot of land out in the Midwest, so I think that's attractive. But we also have data centers. Very fortunate to be in that industry and bringing that here into Kansas City, along with electrical vehicles facilities really starting to emerge across the country, and seeing that. And when we start talking the billions of dollar jobs, we're looking not only for the workforce, but even the professional staff on our side, where just in the North Central region this year, we've hired about 150 new and experienced hires to man our projects. And we're hiring more and more every day. We're very fortunate that the new recruits coming in from the colleges, we're being very fortunate to get a lot of interest into our industry. We have 20 interns just in Kansas City office this summer. And where we're struggling, though, is, I think a couple of us hit on, is the workforce. And one, how do we recruit and how do we get those individuals to want to come into this industry and to make a career on it. And it's really working with the schools and the high schools and the junior highs even, and expressing what kids can learn and do and how successful they can be in this industry. And it just keeps growing. And the massive jobs, the mega jobs are just amazing to be a part of. So it's exciting here, again, challenging just to find that workforce, but we're going to do it. So
That's great, Karen. So as we talk about mega jobs and resourcing, right? I think in major cities, you kind of have the people, right? Not to say that they all work for you, but like how is your group managing that? Right, understanding it takes a while to get a high school kid and kind of productive and
right,
useful. So what are how are you trying to expand that or your outreach?
It's a daily process, and it's all hands on deck. We have a fantastic talent acquisition team, and they're actually all here today. So I'm sending them out on the streets. No, I'm just kidding. But it's so important. You've got to market the company. We've got to show them who we are. Turner does so many great things across the country. We have so many opportunities. And the sky's the limit, and that's very helpful. But we also, Kansas City may be a larger city, but we're still a small town feel. So people want to understand that, coming into this industry and, you may be working for the largest general contractor, but yet you're working for a small family, and keeping that culture, keeping that environment exciting, and everyone knows everyone. And, so it's a focus, but, training, we have to really focus on more training, more just-in-time training. We have our built trainings almost on a bi-monthly basis now. Just as we keep bringing in new people, job shadowing, spending time visiting other projects, other business units that are building some of these mega jobs at other places, or and then also at the same time maintaining all of our other projects and clients. And it's accelerated training programs, and luckily we have a online systems to train. Everyone's got to be willing to chip in and roll up their sleeves, and it's a daily work in progress.
Yeah, I wonder, like, Brooke, I believe you'd mentioned strategic partnerships, right? So like how are, and this is to anyone, how are we leveraging that, right? Is it just mega jobs? Is it specific, just public works? Like, is there an opportunity there to kind of leverage those relationships?
Strategic partnerships with what? With MBWBEs or in general with any firms?
It's not specific, so you can either.
In my experience in New York, that's something we have done, especially for projects where there's, like I mentioned earlier, large MWBE requirement. You can have strategic partnerships, whether it's through trade partners or a JV agreement with another general contractor CM, and that helps what you're running into, Karen, which is maybe a workforce shortage or a lack of skilled labor, and you can do two things, right? Fulfill the MBWBE requirement, and at the same time bring in talent to your team. That's been something that we've done.
So let me, that's on the subcontractor and the partnering side. The other partnering side worth noting, Nellie, is we are doing more and more alignment with other partnerships, design partnerships. What makes the likes of the other major national design firms tick? Well, how are they addressing the same challenges that we have? It just is a different flavor and a different color, right? And understanding how they're tackling those issues and how they're doing the things that Karen was just describing from their perspective, big companies, small companies, is important, because what we find is we're a lot more alike than we're not. The challenges are a lot more alike than they're not. It's just that we're solving them for different reasons, right? Our risk profile looks different than those in most cases. Now in design build, a lot of it is a lot more aligned than that. And by getting aligned, whether it is design build or not, is a very helpful thing to do for project success at the end of the day. Not just the people, which is kind of where your question started, but it's about, you know, being aligned so the people can be aligned so that then there is project success. So I think that alignment right from the owner, developer, client, owner on down is critical. It's got to be at every step of the way.
Yeah, when you talk about alignment, you're talking really about working in collaboration, right?
Yeah.
Sharing information real time. I mentioned earlier supply chain issues, lead time issues, or even escalation. You know, one of the things that we're seeing in New York is as we're getting pricing from, I'll speak to my area of expertise, subcontractors and trade partners, a lot of times due to uncertainty in the supply chain, maybe we get pricing that's only good for 15 days. 30 days, and that kind of information needs to be communicated in real time with ownership, design team, and all the stakeholders of the project. So that alignment and that collaboration is key.
Yeah, Brooke, that's
Nick, you go.
sorry, Rob. I was just going to say that I think that hits home with everybody on this panel, but also in the audience. And the big thing that exactly to that is what happens a lot of times, especially on private jobs where there's a pro forma to be met. And a lot of times clients don't want to necessarily share what that pro forma is or that budget. And so what happens is that there's a perpetual churn of pre-construction to a number. And by the time we get to the VE, the escalation is increased to where you're now getting a lesser product for, you know, the same price. And so that level of transparency and collaboration that Rob and Brooke are speaking about is so important that if you're selecting a partner, right, it's having that true trust back and forth, because we can help, and our counterparts in the industry can really help you get to that end game a lot more efficiently with that level of collaboration.
So Nick, just adding to that, the driving the design in what we're seeing more and more, again, whether design build or not design build, driving the design could be procurement, could be sourcing. And in a lot of cases, that's going to actually drive design solutions, right? Whether it be materials, whether it be equipment, whether it be components, whether it be systems. And I think that's a very critical part of any project. The procurement plan is going to drive a lot of those answers. It might not be necessarily just a user group, how they operate, what their needs are. Of course, these things are important, but at the end of the day, there's going to be a schedule, there's going to be a cost. Those things are typically pretty important, and they need to be as certain as possible. Driving procurement into a process of that planning is absolutely critical. And the sooner our design teams are aligned with us on what those answers are, I think the easier it's going to be to get to a list of solutions that probably meet the time and the money needs.
Good, Rob, you're right.
Stu, just curious, what, you know, are there similarities in Toronto? Are you seeing the similar themes?
We are dealing with a continuous cycle, as Nick was talking about, you know, related to pre-construction and budget approvals. A lot of our work that has had government money flowing towards it is in the public sector, and higher education in Canada is publicly funded for the most part. Healthcare is publicly funded, and unfortunately, they get caught up in this cycle. And when a budget is completed, you know, a year and a half ago, or sometimes even pre-pandemic, and then vetted by a cost consultant, we end up in a pre-construction process, and next thing you know, we're 10-20% higher than the cost consultant's budget and the pro forma that was established. So we go through a value engineering. What Nick was referring to is even in that maybe 3-month value engineering phase, the escalation is another 10%, and so it's a bit of chasing your tail. So really pursuing partnership-oriented arrangements, partnership-oriented procurement models to help get real, accurate, timely cost data that supports progressing the work. At the end of the day, our owners are envisioning projects that add value to the community and are needed to support services, and we've got to work together to accelerate the programs.
So you brought up escalation. Stuart. And I think that's obviously we're all feeling that pretty hard. We were probably approaching projects quite differently 24, even 12 months ago, right? And now we might be inclined. And again, the answers to, there's not one answer for anyone for all projects. There's a different answer for every individual project. And that's obviously based on the complexity of the job, the timing and region, all those sorts of things. But I will say, we might think another minute about necessarily aligning with a design assist partner as soon as you're in concept plans. That may not be the right answer. The right answer may be a combination of let's get down the road a little bit on design. Let's develop something so that we don't go back to the marketplace 3 and 4 times, and that's not a good thing either. Instead, maybe it makes more sense to get a little development, control that design to a point, and go once. That could apply, and that may help. We're thinking that might help to control the escalation factor a little bit better. Again, it depends on
I also think, just to build on that, what we've seen, and we're heavily involved in the interiors market here in Toronto and across Canada, we're seeing significant uptick on design assist, and even in the interiors market. How do you work through design assist on a millwork package to help facilitate securing a slot in a production cycle and get a partnership even down to the sub-trade level? So you got to really think about how you can change the process to secure pricing and production slots through the whole development process.
Yeah, we're talking a lot about mega jobs. We just had a question come in that I thought was relevant. How are we seeing it more? We used to talk about mega jobs and public jobs. What about, commercial, private owner jobs? Are you seeing the same kind of trends with the escalation, with the inflation on jobs with a shorter duration?
Yeah.
So universal nods.
Yeah, we are. We are. And
it's everywhere. Go ahead.
I mean, one of the things that you have to, I think I'd like to share with the community that's out there right now is, as Rob said, things have changed over the last 6, 12, 24 months. And there's a huge amount of risk today because of supply chain, because of lack of labor. And if a private developer wants to push all of the risk to the contractor and our designers, it's not going to be for a good project. I think developers have to rethink a little bit about the way we all do work together. We talked about sharing things during the design, the pro forma. It goes well beyond that now. In public work, especially at airports. I mean, there's so much airport work out there right now, which are, 3-4 years ago, a $500 million job was big. Today, a $2 billion job is normal. So the risk that's in those, if a client believes that because I go in and do a design build, I'm giving all the risk to the contractor and the design team, that's not the way things work. And it really takes a collaborative effort of dealing with the client, if it's a joint venture with the contractors, to make sure that their people work together with the architects. It all starts up front, and it's a different world out there, not because of COVID. It's just because things have changed in our industry. It took us a long time to go from laying one brick at a time to prefab, to design build, to many of the things we're talking about today. And I hope that if we give anything out of today's presentation, that it's to be more open and collaborative as a group of people, not just contractors, but all of us on your projects.
In Kansas City, I mean, we have a lot of, I'll call them mid-sized projects up to about 30 million. And, in our $10 to $15 million projects that typically have a pretty quick schedule, we're having to delay the start of those because of supply chain materials. I mean, I'm buying out a job right now. Well, I'm not, my procurement manager is, don't worry, Brock. But we are being told that we're not getting roofing for a year, 12 months. And I'm like, well, we're supposed to be done with the job in 14 months. So that's not going to work, So And those are the conversations I think, Rory, is you're saying, having those partnerships early on, because then you can help mitigate the cost increases and stuff as planning that project. So maybe you don't start right away, you push it, but you pre-order everything, you know, and then it's a shift from just 3 years ago when it was just in time deliveries, you know, because we didn't want to stockpile. We're actually looking at warehousing and storing materials so we can complete the jobs and the required schedules. We have a couple that we have pre-ordered steel just to get it going before the design's complete. So, you know, really being creative and procuring and working with our clients, the design team as one is, like Rory said, it's critical in this day and age.
Karen, something else too that we're seeing, I'm sorry, Rory, something else that we're seeing in Texas, and I've heard in other cities as well, but permits used to be not such a big focus, but the resource concern has absolutely affected that. And so that's a big advice that I would give too, whether you're a contractor, a developer, a client, subcontractor, is really understanding your local jurisdictions and their permit resources and processes, because that on significant jobs, big or small, we've got $2 million jobs, $1 million job, you know, $500 million jobs, and that permit time consistently is double what we have been told or initially thought it would be. So making sure that those types of researches and efforts are done from the beginning so that there is that alignment.
I'll give you a quick example of real life example of how labor and material tied together to screw a project up for us. And this was out in Seattle. We had a fire alarm system that was having a problem getting delivered certain, you know, just the strobe lights. And we thought that was going to be the delay to the project. And we advised the client, you know, we're doing everything we can to get those. We finally were able to work through internally and procure the materials a little bit quicker than we had thought. And we went to the fire department and said, you know, we finally got them, you know, we're ready for our inspection. And they said, okay, 45 days, we'll have, you know, an inspector ready. And we said, you know, no, we need them now. And how did it get affected for us? In the city of Seattle, 6 fire inspectors retired almost at the same time. Well, when they retired, they had built up time in their vacation. So the city had to continue paying them while they in fact weren't working anymore. So they couldn't hire somebody to bring them in to replace them because they didn't have double funds. And that's how deep these things can go today. So as you're looking for a partner, as a contractor, an architect, as a developer, you've really got to start thinking way outside the box. We were shocked when we heard that. And, you know, a city the size of Seattle have 6 fire inspectors all retire within a month of each other. So, you know, a client in the past could have been very upset with us. Well, how would we have known? And those are the things that you have to sit down at a round table and talk about when you're ready to start your projects.
For sure.
All
So
right, so I'm not submitting any jobs to the city of Seattle that require fire alarms. Just saying that.
There you go.
or you can call retirements out of your
Either that or I'll
Out of
put
your
in the
GP.
application to be an inspector at the Seattle Fire Department. Just
There you
saying.
go.
The interesting thing is, in that story, to me, the one thing that you realize post-COVID is the one thing that's constant in our industry is change, right? Whether it be the war in Ukraine, whether it be natural disasters, whether it be the cost of fuel, there's always something that's impacting this industry. So just when you think you ordered the strobe lights, you got everything done and you're ready to go, something else happened. And that's why I was suggesting earlier the early engagement, early involvement, and working in collaboration, really, whether it's a design build delivery method, whether it's a design bid build, the collaboration aspect and just the transparency and really digging deep into the supply chain, understanding where your material on the job is coming from, understanding where the labor is coming from at that granular level makes it. And the same, like Nick said, how are we getting our permits? What's our strategy? When does that happen? That is really key to making the project a success and delivering on time and on budget, obviously.
So shifting gears a little bit, looking at your respective cities or markets, how has the back to work been been like in your respective cities? I think the stat for New York is something like 30, low 30s in terms of office occupants being back to work, which is an improvement, but still not pre-pandemic levels. And how is that impacting how you operate? Is that accelerating people to want to get more work done? Is it not impactful?
Just for me, and my answer is going to be different than all you guys because you guys are in regions. You know, I'm sort of touching upon all the regions, but our work, you know, which is more so in the planning design stages of projects for people like Karen, for people like Stuart, et cetera. It's pretty much stayed consistent. Yes, it's true in respective regions, people are certainly working on a hybrid remote kind of environment where there might be 2 days home, 3 days at an office. You know, in the planning stages of what we're doing, it's rather the same. I have a feeling it's probably different for some of the rest of you.
I'd say, yeah, no, I mean, as a whole in our industry, kind of like Rob was saying, the hard thing we have is the disparity between the support staff in the office and the people that are on the job sites. I mean, just being very real, that's the challenge that we have, and other people in the industry have the similar, just because on the job sites, it's hard in some cases when you're physically being on site, physically looking at the field condition to do that remote. Now, I think the company Turner, as well as many other companies, have done a great job coming up with programs that do offer that flexibility, because I do think that it absolutely is the future, right? I mean, I think that is what our employees are looking for. And we have to be open-minded to find ways to provide that level of flexibility. And so it's hard to really measure that productivity right now. I think we're still relatively early in that journey, but nonetheless, I do think that it's what's happening, and we got to find ways to still provide accountability and still provide the results that our clients expect of us, but provide that level of balance.
Rob, going back to just from a design perspective, are you seeing clients plan for that? Or is to your point, is it a not issue? People just expect for full occupancy. Are you seeing that impacting real estate in any way?
I would say, well, yeah, for sure, because you know everything trickles down, right? From a designer's perspective, I'll just speak about the designers that we mostly work hand in hand with. You know, a lot of those folks still are working in a remote environment. Very few of the designers we work with have 100% people back to work. I think most of us would agree that that's the case. But what's impacted? Very little, very little. Some of the real estate people that are on the phone could probably comment better about regionally what it's meant for them and their plans for what they're developing, what they're building, and how they're building it. I mean, certainly designs are evolving. I mean, that we all know, right? When you're talking about the interiors market, things are quite different, and we're planning for quite different things than we were 2 and 3 years ago. And I've seen some tremendously creative solutions present themselves with some of our design partners out there, and kudos to them. I mean, really cool stuff. Planning for, you know, the environment where people are in, people are out, planning for 60% of their total population in a given region, for example, or less or more. And what does that mean? What does an open seating environment really look like now? It's different than it was 3 and 4 years ago. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, Melly. So I kind of might have gone off on a tangent there, but that's sort of what we're saying.
Thanks, Rob. Jumping back to local activities, where are you seeing key sectors? What are some sectors, like Brooke, you mentioned aviation is booming in New York, residential is cooling off a little bit. What other trends are you seeing in where you sit?
So in New York, yep, I would say at both LaGuardia, Newark even, and JFK, there's a lot of work out there. Specifically JFK, in the near future is probably upwards of $10 billion worth of work to be done there. Residential is cooling off, like I said. I would expect healthcare to start kicking up in the New York area, and a lot of tenant fit out work. But there's a lot of competition, right? There's a lot of competition for most of that work.
I'll speak to Toronto specifically. We have seen an overwhelming increase in technology projects, technology general, whether it's critical facilities or technology or software development. But technology has just been off the charts, and that has, even been multiplied even further by a significant uptick in lab and life sciences work as we seek to kind of localize production cycles and understand the new world state. And so we've seen a significant engagement of our partners from south of the border come into the Canadian market and really try to help develop the Canadian marketplace in the lab and life sciences sector, which I think is a tremendous positive trend.
The Kansas City area outside the mega projects, we have some really exciting stuff happening with sports. So youth sports facilities, indoor, outdoor facilities are huge. Soccer, tomorrow we're expecting hopefully an announcement of the World Cup, and they're building the first women's professional stadium here in Kansas City. So that's getting ready to be underway. And our Royals, Chiefs, talk about future of both of them and a couple of the local universities with some football. So it's really exciting to have some unique, items outside of the mega jobs to be able to be chasing and a part of. The justice has really been a key for us. A lot of the fire stations, police facilities are all being either new build or renovated. And then just the city municipal work is really hot and heavy here in KC as well. So
it sounds like all of Kansas.
everything in Kansas. Move to Kansas.
And Karen, of course, you had to plug your Chiefs. You just had to find a way to throw a plug in.
I had to throw them in there.
Yeah, a lot of the same stuff that everyone else has said, but a little bit of a twist on that question, Nellie, is outside of market segments, it's been really cool to see the increased focus back on sustainability, and just as far as not just on the, both private sector, public sector, and just, that's aligned with a lot of our visions from our company across the board, but been really great to see. I mean, a lot of, not even just getting the certificate, but doing the right things for the, the future of the environment and everything else. So a lot of LEED Platinum requests, a lot of fit well and well, initiatives, and just, it's great to, see that. So.
I mean, just to build on that, we've seen a huge transition towards mass timber in the Ontario market. There's 26 mass timber projects in various stages of development in Ontario alone. And, what a change in how you envision a project and how you look at sustainability and your carbon footprint, and the commitments that a lot of our clients are making are challenging, but feasible if you really challenge yourself to look at things from a different perspective and a different way.
And I think Rob would probably be able to attest to this, but what I like is that as the society is becoming more vocal and visible on mental health, that a lot of the well and fit well revolves around that. And so it's great to see that from a design perspective, probably a little bit more than construction, but design and construction, how that type of thought process is being built into, into the design, and I think that's exciting to see.
Yeah. So Nick, I'll just take off that. So you guys talk about sustainability, of course, right? Mass timber falls within those categories. Some of the other areas of focus with looking forward with where the industry is going, you got to look at carbon. How are you analyzing carbon on buildings? Lots of owners are looking at that. You got to look at energy. How are these facilities performing not only now but in the future? Owners are looking at things like circularity. What happens when we build this building and the building goes away? What happens to those materials? Whoever thought of that 50 years ago? Some of the concepts they're just very, very important. And we find ourselves being involved with all these subjects almost on every project, prefabrication, modularization, the list goes on and on. All of those things are part of the thinking process and design, and ultimately, part of that alignment that I was speaking to a little bit earlier.
Okay, so just a quick time check. We've got about 18 minutes, decent amount of questions have come in. So I'm going to switch gears now to questions. And apologies if they're a little all over the place. I'm trying to group them as they're coming in. So there may be some bouncing here. I'll do my best to kind of keep them along the same themes. So there's been a few questions coming in about the commodities market and how it's impacting. Is it as an indicator of construction cost, as ways of how we're mitigating it? What are your thoughts on that? And also, how are we dealing with tariffs and imports? Like, is there any thoughts around that as well for pricing relief?
That's a great question for our market today, Nellie. From a material standpoint and in the commodities, I mean, if you take lumber and plywood, I mean, everyone saw what those things did. I mean, plywood went up 300%. It was crazy. It's back down a little bit now. Again, it goes back to your relationship with your client. Are they going to make you eat all that? Because it literally happened overnight. You're seeing that with, copper, with different materials that are used in the electrical industry. You see it in the industry for cars, with the chips that they can't get. And there's literally a backlog of almost a year of car deliveries. It is affecting us, and it is having a severe impact on pricing. We've had bids across the country that contractors, and I think this was said earlier, it may be held 15 days for their pricing. Well, we don't even, we've just opened the envelope, let alone award the job. So it's going to be difficult. I think that, and I'll let the other cities talk, I know that we see that through the global development team and people asking questions. How do we protect ourselves? What do we do? And there probably will be clients that we're not going to be able to work around because they can't afford to have that type of a fluctuation in their portfolio or in their performance. So it's going to be a challenge coming up.
I'll chime in from the trade partner side. Yep, steel, copper, aluminum, and oil, lumber, like Rory mentioned. These are commodities that we're seeing big spikes and continued spikes for a long period of time. So as we're buying work in the New York area, to protect ourselves, one of the things that we try to do is get lump sum pricing based on a specific schedule, right? And as we're releasing the work, maybe what we're seeing is trade partners that are buying a lot of the raw material up front, even though the job may be a little bit down the road, right? So they could buy some of the material. So the financial strength of the trade partner you're partnering with makes a difference, and understanding whether they could do that or not is key. And like Rory mentioned, transparency as the other key thing here, right? As we understand what is impacting the subcontractor's price or the trade partner's price, we got to make sure we relay that information to the owner and the project stakeholders, right? And when you look at what makes up the subcontractor's price, it's labor and material, and material. When you look at it, it's raw materials, right? Fabrication and shipping. And if I was to sit there and say, okay, the only thing that's moving is cost of raw materials, then cost of construction goes up. However, the thing to look at in each local market is, is backlog. How's that subcontractor or trade partner's backlog? What does the local market look like? Is it busy? Is it not? Would they absorb some of the costs for the cost premiums that you see because of commodities? Would they not be able to because of what is around that local marketplace? That's key to communicate to your owner.
One last question on materials, and then we'll move on to others. When do you see relief, right? Understanding no one's going to hold you to it. Brooke, this is the disclaimer for you, right? What does your gut tell you? Is it end of this year? Is it next year? Is it can we even tell at this point?
You can't talk politics on this call.
Whatever you say, you have to testify in front of the Senate. So
I don't think you can predict it right now. No, I really don't.
Okay.
I don't see it going back to pre-COVID ever. I would say that, I get that question a lot from clients. It's like, if we wait a year or two, it'll just be back to where it was. And that's not going to happen. I mean, at this point, hopefully it levels off, but I don't know when. And it's not.
The sad thing is, if you look at the stock market and all the markets, they're dropping like rocks. Yeah. Anybody who's in crypto, I mean, it's a disgrace what that's doing. Bitcoin was trading at 65,000. It's trading at 20,000. I don't think there's anybody. You've got the negative of people losing that money, and you've got costs that are just skyrocketing around the world.
So that's a great segue to a few other questions that came in about, everyone's talking about how busy everything is. There's a labor shortage, but there's material escalation, but clients still seem to be building, right? It seems like it hasn't dampened the construction, thankfully, the construction market. How do you explain that? Is it what Karen is saying, because people are realizing it's never going to end, so I might as well just go? What do you think is the thought process behind that?
I think Karen said it well. I mean, the developers have sat on their money and their projects through COVID, through bad times. They see that the market is somewhat in a tremendous disarray, and they're finally just saying, listen, we know that the market needs more office space or needs the upgraded office space. So let's step in. I think they're doing it very cautiously. Mm-hmm. I don't think I can remember the last time I saw a spec building going up by a developer. They all have tenants, and it's usually because of the differences in tenants' requirements today because of the flexible work schedules. That's never going to go away. People realize that they can work at home. Clients are contractors, developers, everybody has realized they can have people work at home successfully and not have to spend $100,000 for $100,000 worth of rentable square footage. They can do it in 50,000 and let the people work home. So things have changed.
Yeah, if I can, Nellie, just adding to that, a lot of it ties to what a lot of people said, that people sat on their money. A lot of it was public. So first off, the transportation bill was a big deal. I mean, that was a lot of money that was released and put out there. Number two, there's a lot of bonds of municipalities that are big dollar bond money that are now just being released. But what's happening is that even though those jobs are now going forward, is that just like I think maybe Stuart or someone said, is the vision of what they could get for that money when those programs were released is very different what that dollar can now buy. And so the money is there in a lot of ways, but what the expectations of what they're getting for that money is very far apart. And that's what I think each and every one of us are living with.
I think something that everybody on the phone in this group needs to really watch, because it may have a huge effect. I don't know if people have seen what the interest rate has done over the last 30 days. It's already over 6%, and it was at 3 30 days ago. If that continues, it's going to have an effect on development, especially private development.
But and everything we're saying is true, and there's a lot to be concerned about. The trends are very hard to predict, but the positives, as you said, Nellie, that the construction continues to be there, is that across multiple market segments, and that's such a positive for what Turner is, that we're diversified across so many different platforms. But as a whole, as a developer, as a client, is that there's always going to be a need, right? As we continue, I mean, from a healthcare perspective, that's not going to go anywhere. From an infrastructure standpoint of, there's going to be that need. And so there's always going to be needs, various and different, market segments. Just some are going to be up and down depending on, where in the world we are with all the things that we're discussing. So
that's exactly right. Like you said, the need is there, and trying to predict the commodities market or when we'll be at bottom, probably not something that any one of us here could do. But understanding your local market is probably key, right? Because, there's the things that impact pricing. It's not just commodities pricing, right? It's not just the labor, but there's also other things that impact it, like supply and demand, right? And like I said earlier, backlog. So knowing that and knowing when it makes sense to put out a package to bid so you can get the most competitive price is probably, that's key.
And Brooke, I think you may have kind of started to answer this, but if I'm a client, a developer, and I know that supply chains are concerned, materials are concerned, right? There's a whole lot of flags that are happening in the market. How do we reassure owners that trades or vendors or even contractors are not taking advantage of the market, right? What are the red flags that as a client you want to look out for?
Yeah, so to me, it's really, and I think Rob touched on it earlier, whether it's design build or regardless of the type of the delivery, making sure you have competition, right? First off, making sure that there's enough capable bidders. You could still understand where your material is coming from. Sometimes, a lot of time, what we'll see is proprietary products that are specified. If we do see that, to me, I like to encourage maybe alternate products to also be listed. Why? Again, so we could create a little bit more competition and understand dollars wise where we could get to, schedule wise where we could get to, and also availability of materials. So to me, it's really digging deep and understanding where is the material coming from for each component that you're buying, and making sure that you get that information not only from subcontractor and trade partners that are bidding it to you, but also from the manufacturers and vendors that we deal with on a day-to-day basis.
The other part, Nellie, is, in trying to say, well, how do you know? I think it's a judgment call, and you gotta challenge. I think everyone has to challenge whichever tier they're communicating with, right? Why is this happening? Let's dig a little deeper. Let's understand where it's coming from. Brooke's point, where is it coming from? I think those challenges have, because there is gouging going on. I think we all would agree with that. So how do we control that? You got to just continue to challenge, understand, break it down, do your due diligence, and hopefully you can mitigate whatever that exposure is and whatever your task is. We're all facing that every single day, and what's reasonable, what isn't. I don't know if there's an answer to that question, but we all know that none of it feels good right now.
Sure. So with that, we've got 5 minutes, and I want to make sure we stop at 1. Outlook. What are you all thinking over through the end of the year? What's the let's try to end positively if we can.
Well, there's good busy and bad busy. I think most of it's good busy, but sometimes it's bad busy. High level of activity in the design build marketplace. I don't see that changing at all. I see it carrying into next year. Now, whether some of those projects go away or not, we'll see. Some projects that were around before COVID never resumed, right? But most did. So, but I see a continued high level of activity.
Yeah, and I really see that. Like, I love that it's sparking innovation. I really have seen so many cool and very innovative things in the market. I mean, a 20-second plug. I mean, just at the airport at DFW, I mean, prefabbing an entire, like, multiple gates off-site, so that it doesn't disrupt, the flights, and being able to have the airlines continue their run of business. I mean, that's some innovative stuff to be able to not just think it, not just design it, but to actually plan it and execute. It's pretty impressive, but there's examples of like that around the country, a lot to do with, other concerns we have. So big positive there.
I was going to say the same thing, or a similar thing at least. The outlook is opportunity, huge opportunity to try new things, to engage in the industry, to engage with even our competitors, to improve the industry as a whole. What can we do differently, and how can we make it more sustainable, and how can we deliver for all of our clients together?
One of the things that we're also able to do right now, while unions are not as prevalent around the country as they may be in New York City, unions do have great training programs, and to be able to work with them or some of the larger non-union companies on some of the things that Nick and Stuart have just talked about, prefabbing things. Unions have given into a lot of things, and they're not nearly as strong or they don't put the obstacles up that they used to. So I think, where you can still deal with unions, and you have to, especially in the mechanical, electrical, plumbing trades, that pretty much goes around the country. We'll see them, but working with even the smaller contractors, the Turner Construction Management Program, it's meant to help smaller contractors understand the business today. Hopefully, those are the kind of things that we can work together with, because the costs are there. There's nothing we can do about them. One thing that we did with costs when the economy was crazy back in 06, 05, is in order to push some of the risk, not push it, to share the risk with the client. When we had a huge job with steel, we went and bought millwork or mill prices and said, here's the low, here's the high. We'll guarantee it in there. You get the savings if it goes below, but you pick up the risk if it goes high. You can do that on larger projects, or come to a Turner and say, we've got 10 projects around the country. Can you buy the material for us? Maybe you're not even going to build all 10 of them, but we could offer something like that.
From a pre-con and procurement perspective, I see us continuing the same process we've done with the leveling and scope review process, and really doing a deep dive to understand where material is coming from. I don't see that stopping. And to me, it's not negative in my mind to uncover any issues early, right? To do it early is the good news, so that you could find solutions for these issues that we may uncover, right? To me, it's bad if we don't do our job in pre-con and procurement early, and you get out to the site and then you find out that you can't get your material for another 42 weeks or what have you. That's no good, right? In order to have success, we have to start our work a lot earlier and understand what may come at us when we are building the job.
One of the things that I'd like to share with all the people that are on the call, yes, Turner's a contractor. Well, as you can see from this sheet, we've got a global sales team that tries to understand the world. We've got Rob's group, which is the design side. We've also got other parts of Turner, which, even if we're not building your project, hopefully we can help you, whether it's an insurance issue or it's a supply issue from a supply chain. No one buys more construction material than Turner in the United States. And if you've ever hesitated, say, boy, I wish I could call Turner, you can. Don't hesitate giving anybody on this panel a call. We'd love to be able to try to help you. And the only way we can be successful around the country is by working together.
So with that, and Karen, I apologize, but we're at time, and we know it's glorious in Kansas, so I'm going to assume it would have been thumbs up there. So with that, I want to thank our panelists for all the insights today, as well as our attendees. We'll be back in September for our Q3 update. Everyone have a great summer and be safe. Thanks again.
Thank you all.